Hi guys, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and I'm here to tell you about personal development because lockdown was extended by a month. So why don't we take all the time to develop ourselves, especially because there's so many people all over the internet posting memes asking you what you did during your lockdown. So why not use the time to develop yourself, especially because we're all stuck and it's always better to take this time to develop ourselves, especially given the fact that if we were actually really busy during the past few months before the pandemic, right? So because we were busy and we didn't really have any time to focus on ourselves, to spend time with our families, we might as well take all this time to focus on ourselves and help ourselves get better. And that's obviously why I am going to talk to you about personal development. Now, there are so many courses that are provided online as well, so many skills you can learn at home. And I know you have been there, I've been there too, because I was free for a really long time. And the first thing that came to my mind was, hey, I should probably go start some course. But you know what? It didn't actually help. I wasn't really interested in it because after a while I lost touch and I was thinking to myself, you know what I actually need is me time. I need to develop myself. I need to focus on myself, especially because we all are currently going through a hard time as well. So it's always good to use it to focus on ourselves, right? So obviously, I'm here to tell you about what personal development is. Now, obviously, it's not something super complicated. From the word itself, you understand what it's about. But just to simplify things for you, personal development is essentially when you use these skills to develop yourself and to enhance your life so that you can have a better life. And obviously, that's something that we all want to have, especially given the fact that we've all been going through tough times during the pandemic. We've had our mental health taking a toll. We've had to face with loss. We've had to face with panic, especially because this has been such a life-changing event. And probably the last pandemic happened like in the last century, so it's been a while, and we're all new to this. So obviously, that's why it's really important for you to focus on yourself during this time because we're probably not going to get it again for a really long time. So that's why we're talking about personal development today. Now, when it comes to personal development, it doesn't necessarily just have to be self help itself. You can also be someone who is certified to help other people as well. And I'm talking about counselors, coaches, people who help people face their grim realities, especially because we've seen that the spike in mental health has actually, or rather, there has been a spike in mental illnesses, especially during the pandemic, and a lot of people have needed help. So that's why it's very important that we focus on ourselves, that we try to erase all this negative thoughts that we're having and actually to try and move on and work with what we have. So obviously there are different ways on which you can work on personal development. And one of those things is actually something called visualization. Now, it's really effective, but the thing is, you have to put in a lot. It's not a lot of work, but you really need to focus, okay? So, how visualization works is if you imagine yourself in a situation in the future. And what this does is it programs your subconscious mind to think you're experiencing this moment so that you can actually live it out. So what you're doing is you're telling your brain, look, this is going to happen. So your brain is actually now going to start working towards making it happen. Now that's what visualization does. And it's really effective because when you use all your senses and the more detail your visualized picture is, the better it is for you. Now when I say use all senses, I mean, use all your senses. And I'm talking about your sense of smell, how you can hear, the way you can smell things, how you can feel things. Just use all of that, okay? So, for example, if I were to imagine myself out of this pandemic, okay, I'm just going to take something that's really small, but also something a lot of us can relate to because a lot of us really just want to go out and forget that the pandemic ever happened, right? So, if I were to visualize something, I would visualize myself going for a night out with my friends and having some really good dinner, right? Now, that's something that's really achievable, right? But also now when I'm visualizing this, I will also think of the people I'll be around, the smells I will have, because obviously there are so many smells. If you're at a restaurant, you can smell different types of food cooking. There's different sometimes there are even flower arrangements. So there's so many different smells out there as well. And obviously what it would feel like to finally go out, what it would feel to not be stuck at home, or what it would feel like to finally enjoy your friends and not see them through some virtual platform, right? So those are that is how I would use all my senses, and that is how you should use all your senses as well, to make sure that your visualization works better. So the more detailed your visualization is, the better it is. And one of the main things when it comes to personal development is you have to constantly keep practicing it. Okay, it's not a one-time thing. You can't just simply, decide to develop yourself one day and then wake up the next day and decide, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, because that's not how it works. For anything to be perfect, you have to practice it consistently, right? And that's why you have to do this regularly. But also, when you are visualizing things, just make sure you are relaxed, because the more relaxed you are, the more easily it helps your emotions flow, right? And you're constantly, since we're constantly so worried about everything, it's always good to take a few minutes of your day to focus on yourself, to visualize what you want, and to do it, while you're relaxed. So make sure you keep those things in mind when you are visualizing. And also, another thing is connect with your emotions. So when you are imagining this picture of going out and having fun with your friends, you're also going to think of a lot of things, right? Like, oh, how would it feel when I finally go out? So obviously something I would feel is really happy, because I'm a social butterfly. And the first thing I want to do as soon as the lockdown is over is just go out with my friends, because obviously I haven't seen them in so long. And also because it's so nice to spend time with your friends. So obviously you'll feel happy, you'll feel excited, you'll feel free. All those emotions that you will feel at that moment, channel it and let yourself feel it. Because when you let yourself feel those emotions, it's actually really, really going to help it become even more realistic, right? Because you're programming your mind to think of this in a certain way. So the more realistic it is, the easier it is for you to manifest your visualization. And obviously, another thing you can actually do to develop yourself is avoiding negative thoughts. Now, that's not easy at all, especially if you're someone who is constantly overthinking, who has like 100 worries in the world, like me, because I'm always overthinking. It's really hard to stop all the negative thoughts coming into your mind. But the thing is, you can. You just need to keep trying, and you need to convince yourself that you can do this, because a way you can actually avoid negative thoughts is by telling yourself positive things about yourself, like, hey, you went through this, you can get through this. We survived the pandemic, so obviously you can push these negative thoughts to the back of your head and make sure they don't surface. I mean, it's okay for it to surface once in a while, but not all the time, because that's honestly not the best feeling, right? So make sure you avoid negative thoughts as well. And obviously, another thing that we can all do is meditating. Now, meditating is really important, and it's also been, a part of cultures. It's been a traditional part of cultures back when, civilizations were just starting out as well. But even now, it is still a hugely important thing around the world. We've seen a lot of people meditate, and honestly, it makes a lot of sense, because you meditate because it brings you a sense of peace and a sense of purpose. And that is what you're trying to achieve through personal development, right? You want a sense of purpose, you want a sense of achievement, you want to know what you're doing with your life. And that's why you should meditate. So when you're meditating, try to choose an environment that's really calm, that really helps you. Because when I meditate, I usually do it in my garden, because it's such a it's such a nice place actually to meditate, because you can feel the breeze, you can hear all these birds. It's like straight out of Kung Fu Panda. You know what I mean? But make sure you keep those things in mind when you meditate. And also, something else that I constantly feel like I need to remind you, but also ourselves a lot, is to be persistent, because it's really easy for you to pick up something and then drop it, because most of the time we're busy, we don't really have time to focus on these things. So that's why we're constantly always not doing things continuously. But the thing is, if you want to develop yourself, if you visualize your highest self and you want to be that person, you have to be persistent with it. You have to make sure you constantly visualize what you want to be. You meditate, you always have positive thoughts, you reaffirm yourself when you're having negative thoughts, and you're consistent with what you do. So make sure you keep those things in mind when you are doing these things. But also stay tuned, because I have a lot of fun things coming up for you. But right about now, let's head into a break. Right about Sorry, but let's head into a break right now, and I'll be back to discuss, a lot more about what you can do to develop yourself during the lockdown.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay.
They're
Yeah,
nice.
that's very important, right? Because
Very
you want
important,
cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. And if you've just tuned in, we're talking about personal development and why you should develop yourself, especially in the middle of this pandemic, because hey, look, the lockdown got extended, so why not? And if you have any questions or if you want to get in touch with us, just text me on 07852 473 473. I'm super excited to have a chat with you, and I'm super excited to know your opinion and even share my opinion with you about what we're talking today. But let's get back into some tips or ways in which we can actually develop ourselves. So obviously, one thing that you always need to remember is that we are our own competition. sometimes it happens, but we are our own competition. And that's really important because we live in a world that's so competitive. We constantly need to compete with others to prove our worth, even to ourselves. So it's always important to remember that when it comes to competition, you're not competing with others, you're competing with yourself. Set these little challenges for yourself. Think of things that you want to achieve, think of goals you want to achieve, and then try to do that by yourself. But don't ever compare yourself to other people and what they achieve, because obviously the levels that we can achieve and what another person can achieve is actually quite different. Okay, so obviously it's not going to work if you compare yourself to other people. You have to constantly make sure you are comparing you to yourself. Okay, and I know it's hard because when we're growing up, our parents sometimes they compare our grades with other classmates' grades who have gotten better grades, and it's really hard. But the thing is, you have to constantly tell yourself that it's okay. It's okay to sometimes fail. It's okay to keep going. But the thing is, you have to keep going. It's okay to fail. It's okay to try a million times. That's how a lot of people succeeded, by the way. So it's okay to try a million times, but you have to keep going. Okay, so make sure you remember that when you're working on yourself. And another thing, obviously, that you can think about, or that you should use when you're trying to develop yourself, is setting yourself small challenges. And I mean things that are achievable, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, now when it comes to setting yourself challenges, you can always set yourself challenges that are, say you're talking about in a few more years or something, in a few more weeks, but it's entirely up to you. It's up to you to decide whether these challenges you set for yourself, whether you want to achieve them within the course of this year or within the course of a few more years. Okay, because always remember that you work at your own pace. You can't go according to someone else's clock. We all grow and mature at different levels, so it's always important to focus on ourselves and do our own thing instead of actually focusing on other people and how fast they're going. Because I don't know if you've seen this, but have you seen that meme where everyone's like, where it says you're at a certain age, but everyone else who's at that age actually has achieved like so many things. Like sometimes when you're in your 20s, some of your friends are married, they have their kids, they're having really good jobs, and you haven't got that yet, and you feel so useless and worthless. Well, don't worry, because someday it will happen to you too. But the thing is, it's always important to make sure you never rush it, and it's always important to make sure that you work according to your own clock, that you never function for someone else's clock. Okay, so when you're thinking about these challenges, you can think of what you want to do, what kind of challenges you want to set for yourself, and set those challenges for yourself. But importantly, make sure you achieve them as well. Okay, because there's no point in you setting these challenges for yourself if you don't achieve them. And the other thing that I obviously have to say is, even though you have a certain age or a certain period of time that you want to achieve it by, if you can't achieve it exactly at that point, but even later, that's okay. What's important is achieving that goal. Okay, so make sure when you're trying to when you're setting these challenges, make sure you achieve them. Okay. And obviously, something else that's really important is celebrating your victories. Now, obviously, this is really easily said than done, because a lot of us deal with, whether we're actually worthy enough, whether we actually worked hard enough, whether we actually deserve to celebrate it. But the thing is, you should really celebrate everything you win, okay? It's not easy being alive, especially in the middle of a pandemic, and it's not easy focusing on yourself, trying to do things that are good for you. It's really not easy. So if you manage to do that, sometimes even waking up in the morning and making your bed can be it can be a huge thing for someone. So you should always celebrate those victories, okay? Never, ever, ever think that just because you woke up, that doesn't mean you're better. You're not better than anyone, that someone else out there probably accomplished that dream of 10 years, that doesn't mean that you're any less worth than the person who achieved that dreams, okay? Always remember that it's always important for you to remember your worth and to celebrate your victories. So obviously, while you are developing, or rather while you're using these tips to develop yourself, there are also a certain set of skills or attitudes that you need to use for your personal development. And obviously I'm talking about different skills that we need when we are, going about in our daily lives, right? And I'm talking about things like self-awareness, self-knowledge, and things like that. Now I'll tell you why these skills are actually important. So self-awareness is important because you need to be aware of yourself. Now, obviously, that just sounds like I just read it the other way around. But the thing is, when you are constantly aware of your mental state, what kind of goals you want to achieve, what kind of purpose you have in life, it really helps you because you're constantly aware of what you want to do. You're aware of your feelings, you're aware of your emotions, and you're keeping yourself in check. So that actually really, really helps you. So whenever you're, thinking of what should I do when it comes to personal development, make sure you are thinking of these things, right? Make sure you're constantly focusing on yourself and you're aware of what you want. You're aware of your feelings, your emotions, and everything. Because I know it sounds like, it sounds like something you can just say, and some of these things are actually easier said than done. But importantly, it's always better if you can be aware of these things, because it really, really will help you in the long run. And something else that you can actually focus on is improving your skills, okay? Especially because we have a lot of free time, not a lot of free time, but we have free time than we did before. And something I love to do is I love to cook. So I'm constantly experimenting new recipes. I'm trying out new things. I'm making my own things. It's always important that you improve your skills so you'll feel better in yourself. Like that is something you can reward yourself for. When I said celebrate your victories, this is what I mean. When you improve a skill, say you can cook, or rather you can bake something so much better than you used to before, then you should reward yourself for it. Like, I achieved this, I worked on this skill, I actually managed to help myself. So that means I'm actually going somewhere. That means I'm actually helping myself. So obviously things like that you need to develop for yourself so that it will help you in the future as well. And another thing a lot of us have been facing, especially during this time, is an identity crisis, right? Because this whole pandemic, it's something new. We've never faced this before. And the first thing that came to your mind is, what am I? Like, how do you feel in a pandemic, right? Like, how are you supposed to feel? Why is this happening? There are so many questions that come into your head. And especially when you're in a situation like this, when something like a pandemic, it's so indefinite, you don't know how long you're stuck in it for. It's always good for you to take a few minutes, think of yourself, what kind of person you want to be, what kind of identity crisis you're currently having right now, what does it feel like to be in the middle of a pandemic, things like that. Always make sure to take a moment and think about it, because it's important, and it also really, really helps you establish yourself. And it doesn't even have to be things related to the pandemic. In general, a lot of us seem to be distracted or lose focus of what kind of people we are. And I can personally relate to this because I've been in this situation so many times, right? I've been in situations where I didn't know who I was. I was constantly questioning, like, what is my worth? Who am I? What do I mean to people? Am I actually worth it? Am I important to people? So those are some of the questions that you feel when you're going through an identity crisis. And that's why you should actually focus on yourselves as well when you're building or renewing your identity, especially when it comes to personal development. And obviously, another thing that we can all talk about or think about is improving your career, right? So obviously, a lot of us, most of us lost our jobs. Most of us, lost our source of income. Most of us are struggling, but that's okay, because that's what life is. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to struggle, especially in the middle of a pandemic, because these things we haven't experienced before. So it's completely new to us. We don't know what we're dealing with, and obviously it's really hard to actually deal with things like that. So it's completely normal for you to want to improve your skills or help your identity, so you can now let it influence your career. Because when you're sure of yourself, there's a certain sense of confidence, there's a certain level of confidence that nobody can take away from you. And no matter what bad thing happens, you will always have that confidence. And that's why I said renewing, or rather building your identity, is really important. Because when you have this self-confidence, when you know who you are, when you know your purpose, you are unbeatable. And that's why personal development is so important, especially in this day and age that we live in, right? So obviously, make sure you build or you renew your identity, you improve your, and that will actually help you improve your career. Now, another thing a lot of us need to focus on currently is our health, okay? Especially because we're not allowed to go out as much as we're not allowed to go out, actually we're not allowed to go out, right? So obviously that means that we need to take into consideration our fitness as well, right? And when it comes to personal development, it doesn't always have to be mental development only. It can be physical development as well, right? Because as a human being, we have different needs. We have physical needs, we have mental needs, we have emotional needs, we have spiritual needs. So it's always important that you develop all of these things and not just one part of yourself, okay? Especially because now you can actually focus on yourself a lot. You can focus on the things you love, on the people you love, on the skills that you love, and that will actually help you a lot, okay? So another thing obviously that comes to mind is health, but we will get back into that in a few more minutes because we are actually about to head for some commercials, and we'll be right back.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
They're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you'll interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio, and we're back on our session about personal development in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about what kind of attitudes or skills will help you develop yourself and what kind of skills you need to develop. But also, if you want to get in touch with us, you can text us on 078 52 473 473. But you can also follow us on our socials: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so much more. So make sure you check those out. And if you want to get in touch with us, make sure you text me on 078 52 473 473. I would be so glad and so excited if you could be a part of the show, get in touch with me, share your opinions so I can share my opinions with you as well. And that is what that is about, okay? But let's get back into what we were talking about, which was tips or skills that you can actually use to develop yourself. So I was talking about improving your health. Now, obviously, because it's in the middle of a pandemic and we're all going through so many things, it's actually hard to focus on our health as well. But the thing is, we need to focus on our health as well, okay? Especially because the pandemic kind of started because we were not really being healthy. Not necessarily, but it actually, if you think about it, it's because we someone out there just decided to go and eat meat. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is the pandemic has actually made me think about what is actually good, being a vegetarian or just consuming meat as well. Now I understand that meat is actually one of it's important because it has protein and you need protein in your life. But the thing is, a lot of these pandemics could be avoided if we were probably vegetarian. Just a suggestion, though. But you know what I mean. It's always good. But what I'm trying to actually say is, you need to find the right balance between the amount of meat you eat versus the amount of vegetables you eat. It's always good to have a balanced diet, which is what we're taught in our health books all the time. Always have a balanced diet. Make sure it consists of these nutrients, and that is how you maintain your health. Okay, but also while having a diet, make sure you focus on exercises as well. And it doesn't have to be an intensive workout. It doesn't have to be like 40 burpees and 30 lunges and 25 crunches. I'm really bad at like working out, so I do like the easiest and I relax and then I say I worked out. But when it comes to your health, make sure you do a few exercises, you eat your meals properly, and also make sure you drink a lot of water and stay hydrated. I always love to tell people this: stay hydrated, because being hydrated is important, okay? But making sure you focus on your health as well, because we tend to neglect our health, our physical health, because look, we're all caught up. We don't know what's happening, so we're constantly eating a lot of food, watching Netflix, watching movies, doing a lot of things that we couldn't, not that we couldn't do, but things that we didn't have time to do, right? So while you're binge watching Netflix, make sure you also remember to work out a little bit, okay? And another thing, or rather a few skills that you need to develop when it comes to developing yourself is your emotional stability. Now, emotional stability is really important, and that's why I need to constantly, or rather, I feel like I have to tell you about this constantly, is because I myself is someone who advocates for mental health a lot. Because mental health or your emotional stability is really important, and it's going to affect the way you feel about so many things, right? And especially because we're in this lockdown, because we're isolated, we're with ourselves, we are going to feel things so much more than we did before. Our feelings are going to be exacerbated, it's going to be intensified, we're going to feel it so much more than we actually felt it back then. And that's why you need to know how to control this. especially if you're someone who is going through a lot of changes, someone who is finding it really hard to deal with everything that's going around you. It's really important that you focus on your emotional well-being, right? And that is because when you are talking about your emotional well-being, it's not only how you feel, it's also about how you process things. It's about how you tell your stories to other people. It's about how you simply feel things so much that you have to make sure it doesn't hurt you. Okay, and I know that's easier said than done because we're in this pandemic, so it's really, really hard to do some of these things, especially to even motivate yourself to do that, to determine yourself to do that. It is really hard. Okay, and that's why you should always make sure that you are focusing on stability when it comes to your emotions. Okay, also because when you need to deal with other people, you can't be shouting at them, you can't be screaming at them or yelling at them. You have to be calm, you have to be collected, you have to know how to address those issues. Even if you're personally dealing with something, it's always important that you know how to deal with those emotions. You have to let yourself feel those emotions. You have to let yourself feel those emotions, and then you have to eventually come to terms with it and process it. Okay, that is what it is. But if you're just standing in, we're talking about skills and attitudes that you need to think of developing when you're developing yourself, because these things are definitely going to help you in the future. And it's Sarah, and if you have any if you have any questions or you have any opinions or anything that you want to share with us, you can text me on 07852 473 473, and I will respond to them, and I would be so glad to share my opinion, and I would be so glad to tell everyone about your opinion as well. So make sure you do that. But let's get back into it. But I'm going to move on to financial stability. Now, it's hard to financially be stable right now, but in the long run, I'm not talking about right now when it comes to financial stability, because we're all struggling with being stable ourselves, right? But in the long run, when you're talking about financial stability, you need to focus on saving and having enough finances, because the thing is, it's quite expensive to be alive. And I have been telling this for quite some time to my friends and to my family. It's really expensive to be alive. Like, everything is so expensive out there, right? So you're constantly thinking to yourself, hey, I want to buy this, I would love that. For me, it's simple things like food. I love food. So every time, like, I'm on some app and right, for example, how your Instagram algorithm just knows what you want, like, all the time. You don't even have to say it, but it just knows, like, say you're thinking of food, and it'll show you a picture of food. So that happens to me all the time, because I'm always thinking of something. So this one time when I was thinking of food and I was scrolling down my Instagram, I'm seeing so many amazing pictures of food, right? And I'm like, I really want to eat something. I really want to order something, But also at the same time, it's not really cheap. I mean, it's not expensive either. But the thing is, even if it's affordable, but you constantly keep buying it over and over again, you're also wasting your money, right? You're splurging on yourself. And it's okay to splurge once in a while. I'm not saying it's bad. It's completely fine. But doing it all the time isn't probably the smartest thing to do, right? Because imagine if you were in a situation like we're currently in, or there was some emergency situation that you actually needed funds for, and you just wanted to eat food like me all the time. It would be so hard for you, because at that moment, you wouldn't necessarily have enough money for whatever emergency it is. That's when you start to realize, oh, instead of splurging, I should have actually, saved some money, because just in case something happened and it was an emergency, well, I could have helped myself, right? So that's why it's really, really important for you to think about, your your emotion, or rather your financial stability, when you are, doing things for yourself. And it's not only for yourself. Sometimes you splurge on your friends, you splurge on your family. I'm someone who feels really guilty when I spend on myself, but when it comes to spending on my friends and my family, I have no limit. If I had $1 million, I would spend it all just to, get stuff for my friends or for my family, because I'm that kind of person. So it's always important that even when you're doing that, it's fine to splurge once in a while. I have to keep telling myself this as well. It's okay to splurge once in a while, but don't do it all the time, okay? Because that's definitely not going to help your financial status. And as you grow older, you sort of begin to realize that financial stability is important, because, when you're going to retire, or when you're finally thinking of retiring, when you want to go on a trip after you've retired, because that's basically what you do when you retire, right? You want to, have fun, explore life, because all those years you spent making money, you now want to spend it in some peace, right? That's what you do when you retire. It's then you start to realize, oh, look, even if I did manage to save a bit, it's not necessarily going to help, right? I mean, nobody wants to work forever. Nobody wants to work forever. So it's always important that you are financially stable. So when you in case it's an emergency, say it's your future, you always have something to fall back to, just in case you run out of money, right? Because no one ever thought we would be in a pandemic back when it was, say, 2018, or even 2019 June. You didn't really think we'd be stuck in a pandemic 2 years from now, right? And I'm referring to 2021 June. But obviously, you didn't think that though, right? And when it did happen, we were all freaking out because we didn't have money. We didn't know what to do. Everyone out there was taking such a long time to respond to the situation, and everyone else was struggling to deal with it as well. So obviously, it was very hard for us to actually think about, all of these things. So it's always important for you to have financial stability when you're developing yourself, right? Because all of these things are actually going to help you in the long run. And when you're aware of these things, when you know what other things you need to work on, when you know what you need to focus on, then what you do is you visualize it, and then your mind does it, okay? So everything I'm saying right now, it's always good for you to apply everything, okay? And also, just don't use everything I'm saying. You can do your own research. You can find some tips that will help you, especially if you go up on Pinterest, which is my favorite social media app. You'll find so many ways in which you can visualize, so many ways in which you can meditate, so many ways in which you can affirm yourself, positive affirmations, so many ways in which you can do that, right? So always make sure you do your own thing, but also while you are improving yourself, remember to use these techniques that I said, these techniques that I mentioned, because it's really, really, really going to help you. But right about now, it's time for me to get into a small break and tell you and get back to you about what we're going to talk. But stay tuned, because I have a lot of fun things for you. You can follow us on our socials as well. But right about now, let's get into the break.
it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset, And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he might say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hey, it is your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio, and I am back for our discussion on personal development during the pandemic and what you should focus on and what you should do to help yourself, especially in these tough times, okay? And if you have any opinions, any thoughts that you want to share with us, you can text me on 07852-473-473, or you can even follow us on our socials, that is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so much more, okay? But if you're just tuning in, I am Sarah, and I will be talking to you about how personal development actually helps all of us, right? So let's get right into it. Now, when it comes to personal development, I was talking about why we need to develop ourselves, what kind of things we can do to develop ourselves, and what kind of attitudes we need to keep in mind when we're developing ourselves, right? But let's get into why it's actually important for you to develop yourselves, okay? So I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but he was an American psychologist called Abraham Maslow, okay? And basically what he said, or rather what he introduced, was something called the hierarchy of needs. And what he did with this, though, is actually what he wanted to do was actually to try and show people what was actually important and why we need them. Okay, so in his hierarchy of needs, which is basically this pyramid where there are different levels of needs, different things that we need to grow as human beings, to grow as individuals, he in every one of these layers, he actually put what we need to grow as human beings. And obviously the bottommost layer is physiological needs, which talks about shelter, food, water, basic things like that, right? So obviously those basic things are really important because as people who are growing as humans, we need to consume those things to stay alive, right? Those are our needs. If I may put it that way, those are our needs, okay? And then there are so many other levels, but to get to it, the topmost level, or the right on top of the pyramid, is actually something called self-actualization. Now, self-actualization is a part of personal development. And what Abraham Maslow actually said was, he said that individuals or humans have an inbuilt need for personal development. So this is not something you just wake up today and decide, oh, I'm going to develop myself. No, not really. Apparently, it's there in our brains. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because how many times have you wondered, what is your purpose in life? What do you want to do with life? What is my life meant to be? What kind of impact am I going to make on the world? These are some questions that we have all had, right? So obviously, these are some questions that we have all had. And when it comes to personal development, this is where you sort of, find answers for all of these questions. So Abraham Maslow actually said that because we have an inbuilt need for personal development, we do this through a process called self-actualization. And like the name itself suggests, self-actualization is us, figuring out what we want to do, what kind of people we are, what our purpose in life is, and so on and so forth. So obviously, when it comes to self-actualization, or even this process of personal development, Maslow believed that individuals have limitless room for growth, right? Obviously, we're only, we're the ones who are restricting ourselves, where are our own barriers, if I may. So obviously, we are the ones that sometimes restrict ourselves from growing. We are the ones who put ourselves in comfort zones and completely refuse to get out of them. So when it comes to personal development, it means that you are now going to, take away all these restrictions that you've placed for yourself, take away all these negative thoughts where you think you can't do it, or you're not good enough to do it, or you don't feel confident enough. You take away all of that and you reaffirm yourself with positive things like, you can grow. We can all learn. I have confidence. If I don't have confidence, I will build it eventually. These are the kind of things that we need to start following, and we need to start thinking so that it will actually help us, right? So obviously, this is what Abraham Maslow said as well. He said that we have limitless room for growth, but obviously for us to do that, we actually need to make sure we're focused and we know what we want, okay? So he said that we really need to concentrate, which is something a lot of us find hard, especially right now, because there's so many distractions around us. And, it might be your phone, it might be all the notifications you're getting, or it just might be your family just shouting across, the household to each other. You know how that happens all the time, especially in the middle of an important meeting, or, it's something important. It's a big event in your life, and everyone in your family just decides together in the living room at that one particular moment did shout and yell, and you're thinking, why couldn't you have chosen a better time to do that? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about, right? And that is why we need to get out of our comfort zones, and we need to start taking away all these restrictions we've placed on ourselves and grow as individuals and humans, but not only for ourselves, but also for our friends, our families, our partners. Because when you're someone who has a lot of personal development, you know what you're doing with your life, like you're on the right path, you have confidence, you're aware of what you want, you are sure of how you're going to achieve it, you're going to achieve it. That really helps, because when you're positive and when you're full of energy and when you're full of, good things, you don't always have to be full of it, but you know what I mean? When you're full of good energy, good vibes, if I may, it actually really, really helps the people around you. And I can actually, I can agree to that, because I myself have been in so many situations where I wasn't exactly the bigger person, or I wasn't the best person. But right now, obviously, I've gotten better. I've learned through time. I've worked on myself, and I know the amount of change that I can bring to all the people around me when I am when I have become the person I wanted to be, when I'm, full of positive thoughts, when I'm always, confident, I'm trying to help people, I'm kind, it really, really helps. So obviously, personal development helps us because it pushes us out of our comfort zone. And I know so many people, including myself, who completely refuse to head out of their comfort zone. And what is life without a little risk? You have to always make sure that you're constantly, putting yourself out of your comfort zone. You're pushing yourself to greater heights. You're pushing yourself to do better, because when you're stuck in one place, you stagnate. And when you stagnate, that means you can't grow, because you're stuck in one place. You're stuck on these things. You don't even want to try out new things. And it can be really frustrating and draining sometimes. Although it is comfortable, after a while, you start to question, what is your purpose in life? Like, why am I just stuck in one place? Why am I not doing something different with my life? So that's why it's really important to to push ourselves out of our comfort zones, to test our limits, to push boundaries, or break boundaries rather, and constantly test ourselves, because sometimes it might be frustrating, it might be annoying, it might be hard, but it's always good to do. And another thing that personal development helps us with is boosting our confidence. And I used to be someone who used to be really shy, who wouldn't talk to people unless they talk to me. But I'm changed. I'm a changed girl. And I have a lot of confidence right now. And that is obviously because of things I've done for myself. I've developed myself. And actually speaking, back when I was in school, I used to debate and all of that. So that has obviously really, really helped me boost my confidence. And those kind of activities, it doesn't just have to be the activities I told you about, like visualization. You can also do other fun activities. You know what I mean? You can debate, you can talk to your friends, you can have like a session where you and your friends, exchange your opinions on different things, which me and my friends do a lot. And those kind of things are really helpful, okay? So those kind of things help you boost your confidence, but so does developing yourself. And when you are, not fully developed, but when you have developed yourself and when you know what you want with life, it really, really, really helps you boost confidence. And the best thing about it is people can see it on you. Like when you step out, people can see how confident you are. Like they don't even have to talk to you. Sometimes your face itself shows how confident you are, okay? And another thing, personal development helps us with is developing our strengths, because obviously it's personal development. We're focusing on ourselves, we're developing our strengths, things we've been weak at, also we're developing them. We're trying to be good people, we're trying to become better individuals, right? So obviously it develops your strengths. It helps you become better at whatever you used to be not so good at. You know what I mean? And the most important thing is when you're constantly practicing this, when you're constantly visualizing your future, when you're constantly working towards it, when you're setting these goals, you're celebrating your little victories, even things like waking up, sometimes it can be just reading a book. Like I myself can tell you that I had this time where I was so busy and I did not have time to read books at all. And so because of that, I completely lost that habit of reading books. And believe me, I've been reading since I was 3 years old, and I absolutely love to read. And what was probably the most terrible part was when I couldn't read, I lost that love I had for reading. I lost, the desire to read. And, it doesn't always have to be educational stuff, because I don't always read educational stuff as well. I read a lot of stuff, but the thing is, so I started reading again recently, and the fact that I managed to finish a few books and actually be interested was a huge win for me, because after finally, it was me finally being able to get over the fact that I had like a, time when I couldn't read, when I wasn't interested in it. And it was like this huge, it was a huge problem for me, because like my whole life was just based on reading and writing. Like that's what I did. So when I had this whole issue of I couldn't read, I was so scared. I didn't know what to do, but I finally got over it, and I am actually reading just like I used to. So that was a huge win for me. So it helps to develop your strengths, obviously. And another thing it helps you do is it improves self-awareness. So what I mean by that, and I spoke about this earlier as well. Self-awareness is actually, you being aware of what you want, you being aware of your purpose, you being aware of what kind of individual you are and what you can do, right? So obviously, a lot of this actually helps you become self-aware. It helps you manifest these things. It helps you, know your purpose and know what you want to do in life. And that's why it's really important for you to. That's why it's really important for you to actually think about these things, to think about developing yourself. It's important for you to do that. And it's really, really important to constantly keep practicing these little things that I told you, okay? Because it's not a one-time thing. For you to fully develop yourself, for you to become the person you want to be, that ideal person who's always, you can't always be happy. That's not realistic at all. But, someone who isn't always stressed out, who isn't always going through existential crisis, someone who finally knows what they're doing with their life. It really helps when you know yourself. It helps when you know what you're doing. And it helps when you know what kind of life you want, what kind of future you want, and how you're going to manifest that. It really helps. But it's time for me to get into a break, but don't worry, because I'll be back with a lot more interesting stuff. So make sure you stay tuned. But right about now, let's get back and let's get into the break.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking, you want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts mainly, one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. I mean, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on air, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. I'm a kaleidoscope with a lot of things that you can do while during the lockdown, actually. And also, if you have any, opinions, messages that you want to get across, make sure you text me on 07852 and you can share your opinion with me so we can also, so I can also share it with everyone else and you can know my opinion as well. And I would love to do that, so make sure you do that. But we are back again, and I am here to tell you about toxicity, right? And that is because when it comes to personal development, we all need to deal with, a lot of things, and we can't necessarily deal with, or we can't actually work on ourselves if we don't deal with toxicity. And when I mean toxicity, I'm not talking about, just you or your friends. I'm talking about toxicity everywhere, especially because you can actually, find it everywhere in, everywhere today, rather, actually, wherever you go, whether it's your workplace or your school or even a relationship or a friendship, sometimes even amongst your family, there is a lot of toxicity that is there. And that's why I thought we need to address this and we need to know how to deal with it, especially because if we're working on developing ourselves, we need to know the whole thing, right? You can't just, know one part of it and just wait, because when you are faced with toxic situations, what do you do? What do you do if you are one of those toxic people? And that's why I'm here to tell you about all of those right here on Relax Radio. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But let's get right into it, right? So the thing is, toxicity is basically everywhere, right? And sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's their fault. But the thing is, you have to still be able to identify and deal with it. So to simply explain to you what toxicity is, it's basically where there is constant conflict, where one person seeks to undermine the other, and there is a lot of disrespect and competition. And honestly, this just sounds like a summary of what society currently is. Because to be quite honest, that is what it is. We live in times where everything is so competitive. The world out there is so capitalistic. So you're constantly in this competition to see who's better, right? But the thing is, this competition can actually get really toxic. It can become not that great. It can actually have a lot of, it can have a lot of consequences on people, mentally and physically. And that's why you need to know how to deal with it. And you also need to be able to identify toxicity, right? So, when the thing though is sometimes we're so annoyed with, toxic people, because it's draining, and all the negative moments in that specific situation or relationship actually outweigh all the positive it outweighs all the positive moments that we've had with that person, right? And that's how we know something is toxic, because if you're constantly, sad, or you're constantly drained and you don't have enough energy to communicate with that person, that means they're probably toxic, because that means they're not good for you, right? They're constantly draining your energy, and there are more negative moments. Y'all have had more fights than happy moments. That means they're not good for you, right? So that means that person is toxic. But the thing is, although it's very easy to blame it on toxic people as to why they act a certain way, there is actually a reason for this behavior. And some of it can actually be the fact that they've been in toxic relationships in the past. It could be a romantic relationship, or it could have been a relationship with, with a close family member. But the thing is that relationship was really toxic. It traumatized them, and it gave them a lot of trauma, and that's why they're acting this way. And the thing is, sometimes they're not even aware that they're doing it. Like, some people don't even do it intentionally. Sometimes it's unintentional and they're not aware. And there are also, other reasons, like they could probably be having some undiagnosed mental illness like anxiety or depression, which could also, lead people to act a certain way. So that's a thing. So when it comes to toxic people, it's sort of a hard ground. Like, do you hate them or do you love them? But you can't love them because it's toxic. It's not really helpful for you. So you're thinking, like, what do you do? How do I figure out what to do? And that's a really hard situation to be in. And been there, done that, so I know what it's like. And if you're in a toxic situation right now, I hope what I'm telling you right now will help you. Or even if you're not in one right now, and you might be in one in the future. I hope not, but if it is, I hope these things will actually help you, right? So there are different ways in which you can identify signs of someone being toxic or you being toxic as well, right? And obviously the first thing that comes to your mind, or the first thing that is very, very obvious, is something that you can physically see, right? And this means things like things like physical violence, but you know what I mean. It's those kind of things that help you identify if someone's in a toxic relationship or not, right? But the thing is, more often than not, these the signs of a toxic relationship are actually really subtle. You don't know you're in a toxic situation unless someone points it out to you. And sometimes you're not even aware of what kind of feelings you're going through, because when you've been in a situation like that for such a long time, it becomes normal. That's another issue here. The fact that a lot of these toxic situations have been normalized, and the fact that we aren't aware of what it is, because back then, talking about things like this was like such a taboo topic. So most often people would steer clear of things like that, and that's actually because it was a taboo back then. So obviously a lot of people aren't aware of these changes. They aren't aware of what they're doing, and that's why it's really, really important for people to know what signs are of what are the signs of toxicity and how to deal with it, right? So obviously these things are a few things that are very that if you constantly feel, means you're in a toxic situation, right? So one thing is persistent unhappiness. Now the thing is, if you're constantly unhappy, and when I mean constantly unhappy, I mean if you're constantly sad, you're angry, you're worried, you're depressed, or you even feel like there's a negative shift in your mental health, your emotions, your personality, then that means that you are not happy. And if that feeling has been going on for a really long time, then it's persistent, right? So then you have to ask yourself the question, am I willing to go through this? Do I actually want to put myself in this situation? And what would be the best move for me to make? But the thing is, when it comes to these things, you don't really realize it unless someone points it out, right? And when someone points it out is when you realize, look, I might be in a toxic situation. But the thing is, even when someone points it out, we're so stubborn, we don't want to accept it, right? So the other sign, or another way in which you can identify if you're in a toxic situation, is actually from the concern your friends and family shows. Like, obviously, your family and friends will be concerned when you're in a relationship. That's obvious. But what I'm talking about is when they start telling you things like, you don't look too happy, you don't look too good, did something happen, why are you always sad? If you're always pushing your family away, if you're always not sure of whether you want to talk to them, if you constantly feel like you're not even being allowed to talk to them, then that means you're in a toxic situation. Okay, so the thing is, when your friends and family tell you that you're in a toxic situation, you kind of need to listen to them. The thing is, we're human, and I've been here and I've done this. When I got concerned when my family and friends were concerned about something I was going through, I was like, it's all in your head. Like, something like that definitely isn't happening. And that's because you're the last person to actually figure out that you are in such a terrible situation. So, you're constantly like not sure, you don't want to believe them. And the thing is, sometimes it feels too good to be true. And what I mean by this is sometimes the beginning of the relationship is really, really good. Whether it's romantic or platonic, at the beginning of it, everything seems good and fine. But as time passes, that's when you begin to realize that something isn't right, with it, that things aren't, working out the way it should be. But the thing is, because we're so stubborn and we as humans always want to see the good in people, we hold on to that good start of the relationship and start using that as an excuse to not, end things with that person or cut them out of our life. And that's why it's very important for you to pay attention to what your family and your friends say. And that's why, you should always make sure you keep those things in mind when you're dealing with a toxic situation, when you're dealing with, people manipulating you or even people saying stuff. Just make sure you always keep those things in mind. But stay tuned because I have a lot more coming your way. But right about now, it's time to head into a little break. Okay, but stay tuned. You can text me. You can check out our socials. But stay here because I'll be right back with this after this small break.
Again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah back on Relaks Radio. And if you just joined in, we're talking about science of toxicity and how to deal with it, okay? So let me get right into it. But also if you have, or rather if you want to share your opinions, you can text me on 078 on 078-52-473-473. Okay, so make sure you do that because I would love to hear from you as well. But let's get back into this because I'm here to tell you about different signs when it comes to toxicity. Now, another pretty obvious sign is manipulation. And sometimes you don't know you're being manipulated, but if you feel uncomfortable doing certain things and if you don't feel like, that if you feel like they're not, doing what they're saying they will do, then they're manipulating you. Chances are they probably are, okay? So just make sure that if you're ever being manipulated, make sure you, try to address the fact, or you keep in mind that you're being asked to do something that you don't want to do, so that means you're being manipulated, right? So another thing that obviously is a huge sign, or rather huge red flag of, toxicity is being uncomfortable. If you feel uncomfortable around that person, and when I say this, I mean if you're uncomfortable talking to that person about something, if you're uncomfortable opening up to that person, if you're uncomfortable even just being around that person, that means that you're probably, things aren't probably that great with that person because you don't feel comfortable, right? And if you're also constantly questioning your self-value, your worth, then that is actually you questioning as to what your worth is. And you should never ever come to a situation in your life where you're questioning your self-worth, right? Because end of the day, we've all been through hard things, we've all gotten through them. We are all, doing somewhat better than we used to, or even somewhat worse. But the most important thing is that we'll eventually get better, right? But don't let anyone ever feel like you're not enough simply because you just don't want to play into their reality, right? And also, if someone is being really, really inconsistent, say their promises, say they don't, follow through on their promises, or they don't, or their actions don't match up to their words, then that is a lot. That is actually saying a lot to you about whether they're toxic or not. So make sure you keep those things in mind when you're dealing with people who are toxic. Or when you're trying to figure out if someone is toxic or if you're toxic as well, okay? And all these things I said is not just relevant to other people, but yourself as well, because sometimes we ourselves can be really toxic. So how do you actually deal with being toxic? So that's a really hard question, and to be quite honest, it's easier said than done, because more often than not, we're sort of attached to whoever is being toxic. At a certain stage, we're all attached to people. And the thing is, when you're in a toxic relationship and when you're attached to that person, it's really hard for you to not do what they're asking you to do. So number one, or the first thing that you should do, is you need to avoid playing into their reality. You need to always you need to stop making sure that they're always right, okay? And that's what this means. That means that you need to stop letting them always have the right way. Let them always paint themselves, in a positive light. Because one thing that toxic people love to do, or something that is very commonly seen in toxic people, is how often they victimize themselves. They absolutely love, to victimize themselves. Sometimes, I don't think it happens intentionally, but sometimes unintentionally and intentionally, people who are toxic love to victimize themselves. So obviously, when it comes to that, they're victimizing themselves. And, that is when you realize that they're being toxic, okay? And obviously, when that happens, you need to talk to them about their behavior. Tell them, hey, look, what you're doing isn't right. It's affecting a lot of people. I don't like what is happening. I don't like what I'm going through. So you're not always right, okay? Because just as much as someone can't always be right, you can't always be wrong either. You know what I mean? You can either be right or wrong, but you can't always be wrong or always be right. That does not exist. It's a gray area, for real. So when that's the case, make sure you talk to them about their behavior, right? And this is really important. This is something we don't do a lot, but it is, you need to put yourself first. This is prioritizing yourself. This is why I was telling you need personal development, because when you're in a toxic situation like this and you realize you're in one, you will put yourself first, because you know that this is not what you want. This is not, you don't deserve this, because you are such an amazing person. Jokes aside, you are an amazing person. And, you've been through so much, and there's no reason why people should, treat you any less than what you are, right? So always put yourself first. And another thing that a lot of us have a hard time doing, actually, is setting boundaries. It's very hard for a lot of us to set boundaries because we don't know how to, and we don't want to. Those are the two reasons why it's really hard to set boundaries. So the thing is, when you're setting these boundaries, when you're deciding that you don't want to engage in this toxic situation anymore, you have to make sure you set those boundaries for yourself. Okay, the thing is, when you're in a toxic relationship or when you're in a toxic situation, you can't necessarily afford to think about the other person, because if you're being hurt, if you are not feeling okay, if you're constantly being undermined and undervalued, then that means you need to set boundaries that will help you get better, not them get better. Because like I said, you need to always put yourself first, right? And you should always encourage them to get help. Now, it can be a counselor, it can be talking to a close friend, whatever it is. I know counseling isn't the most, affordable thing in the world. But if you can't afford it, make sure you afford it, because counseling never hurt nobody. If anything, it helps you understand yourself better. It helps you process your emotions and your feelings better. So it's always super important to get counseling whenever you can, and to even encourage other people to get help. And last, this is not something I particularly like doing. I'm pretty sure most of you wouldn't particularly like doing this either. But the thing is, when you don't have any other option, you really have to think about, what do I do? Do I really just, let this carry on? Because when you let a toxic situation carry on, when it is constantly happening and you're not putting a stop to it either, it's going to end up hurting you, because the thing is, with some toxic people, they always somehow manage to find someone who will give them more attention than you, or who they think is more worthy than you are, and they will let go of you. And that's why it's so important that before this happens, you know how to cut them off, okay, or cut them out of your lives. I'll put it simply, you should know how to cut them out of your lives, right? The thing is, it's easier said than done. It's so hard to cut people out of your life, but the thing is, you have to take that step if you care about yourself and if you want yourself to be better, right? So you need to do that. And when it comes to fixing your toxicity, now, so far we were talking about other people and the toxicity, acting like we ourselves didn't have any toxic habits. But the thing is, we do, okay? We're all human. We all have our flaws. We all have times when we're not, necessarily a good person. And that's why it's really, really important that while you're, helping other people get over the toxicity, while you're calling out other people's toxicity, it's also so important that you work on your toxicity, okay? So this means identifying your toxic habits, because the thing is, if you aren't going to identify your toxic habits, you aren't going to know you are being toxic. So the number one thing to do is actually accept the fact that you yourself can be doing something wrong, right? That you yourself can be toxic. And when you identify these toxic habits, then obviously the next step is taking accountability for it, right? You always need to be accountable for what you are doing. You need to be accountable for whatever toxic thing you did, whatever way you hurt someone, because you never get to decide if you hurt someone or not. If someone tells you that you hurt them, then you hurt them. You don't have a choice about whether you hurt them or not. You know what I mean? So if they tell you that you are being toxic, then you need to first identify it, and you need to take responsibility or accountability for your toxic behavior. And when you're dealing with it, say if you are, okay, so the best example that comes to mind is obviously if you are having a fight, so obviously people tend to get very toxic when they're in the middle of a fight. So obviously, if you're in the middle of a fight, what you do is, okay, if you're normally in the middle of a fight, you would shout at them, you would victimize yourself, you would blame everything on them. But if you're trying to change yourself, if you're trying to, tell them or show them that, look, I'm consciously taking an effort to change myself, then what you do is, you act, but the exact opposite way, the exact opposite of how you would normally act. You know what I mean? So if you would normally shout in a fight, this time you will take 5 minutes to breathe, take slow breaths, calm down, and then you will talk to them and tell them, look, I want to talk with you. I'm not going to shout. I'm acknowledging my toxic behavior. I'm now trying to change it. So let us sit down and have a conversation. It's easier said than done. And I myself have been there so many times. It's so hard to not be angry at someone. Okay? But the thing is, you have to fix not that you're broken, but it's always better to help yourself get better. You know what I mean? So always make sure you do that. And another thing you can do is you can get an outside opinion of how to improve. Now, obviously, you're not like some guru. You don't know everything about toxic behavior, but neither do I, right? And it's always important for you to get an outside opinion on how to improve, on whether the changes you're making are actually effective, and whether that will actually change the dynamics of the relationship you have with that person. So if you're being toxic and you want, to help yourself to make yourself get better, then it's always better to, get someone else's opinion. And lastly, it's always good to be consistent. Now, consistency is something really important. So if you're toxic yourself and you want to fix those things, always be consistent. Always work on yourself. Always tell yourself, look, I want to fix myself. This is going to be okay. I'm just going to be consistent and I am going to help myself, right? So always make sure you keep those things in mind when you are Make sure you always keep those things in mind when you're trying to be a better person, when you're dealing with toxic situations. And also make sure you make sure you use these, things I've said, tips I've given to improve yourselves during the lockdown and to essentially become so much better and become a better, happier person who knows what is going on with their life, who knows their purpose in life, and who knows what they want to do. I'm so excited to have been a part of today. But stay tuned because we have a lot more content coming your way on the next few talk shows as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But it's time for me to head out of here. And I have to say bye, but don't worry because I'll be back tomorrow with some more amazing stuff.